welcome back to another episode of In the Green Room with Aidan Keene. Today, my guest is someone that so many people have grown up with watching on TV. He's best known for playing Timmy in the classic television series Lassie, and I'm more than happy to have him today on the show. Please welcome Mr. Jon Provost. Jon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Aiden. Thanks for having me.
This is great. I love learning more about, acting careers and things like that. I'm a musician, but some of these stories are just so amazing, and I'm sure you've got plenty of them.
Oh, sure. Well, the biggest one, and whether you're a musician or any kind of performer, the biggest question is like, how did you get started? What was the motivation? That kind of thing.
That's my first question.
Okay, well, I'll just jump right in.
Great.
Well, my first job, like you mentioned, everybody remembers Lassie, 7 years from 1957 to 1964. 249 half-hour episodes in those 7 years. We did, today they do 10, maybe 12 episodes, but back then we did 34, 36 episodes a year. So, but that's what people remember. But I started last when I was 7, but I had already been in 10 movies, even some early live television programming. So it all started because mom wanted an autograph. Okay.
All right.
Mom, growing up, my parents were not Hollywood people. They were from the South, from Alabama and Texas. And mom, growing up on the farm in Texas, her idol was an actress, Jane Wyman. So, long story short, my parents immigrated to Southern California. My father was an aeronautical engineer. My mother was a seamstress and then became a housewife. In 1953, when I was not quite 3 years old, mom read an ad in the LA Times that Warner Brothers was looking for a 2 to 3 year old blonde boy, and I had a lot of blonde hair back then, to be in this movie starring Jane Wyman. Mom thought if she took me on this audition, she was going to meet Jane Wyman and get her autograph. And that was her motivation. So, long story short, mom takes me on this audition. There were over 200 little boys and little girls. Moms had cut their hair to look, you're 2.5, 3 years old. And I ended up getting the job. And yes, mom did finally get her autograph from Jane Wyman, but that led to another movie. And then that led to the second movie was Country Girl with Bing Crosby and Grace Kelly. The first movie was So Big. Then that led to a contract with RKO for half a dozen movies. And so then, 1956, I'm in Japan filming a movie for RKO. It was the last, and this, Howard Hughes at that time still owned RKO. And he was getting ready to sell the studio to Desi and Lucy, and then it would become Desilu Studios. So I'm in Japan filming one of the first American movies filmed in Japan after the war. This was 1956, only 11 years after we dropped, we almost annihilated Japan. So we're over there making a movie. It was called the Bridge movie. They were trying to bring the two countries back together. So it was a really heartwarming story about a little Japanese, excuse me, boy and an American boy trying to find the American boy's parents I'd been in a plane crash and all kinds of stuff. So we're in Japan. The producers of Lassie are looking to for a younger boy to replace Tommy Rettig, who had been on the show for 3 years.
Mhm.
And the wife of the producers, they're having lunch, and it comes up, and she said, "Oh, well, describe the kids you're looking for." And it was me. So when I got back from Japan, and they had had time to look and see, yes, okay, he can act. They looked at the old movies, and everything was great. But they didn't know how I would react and how Lassie would react because, um, the relationship between the boy and the dog was the utmost importance. So I had been raised around animals and dogs my whole life. We were living at this time. about 50 miles from Hollywood, out in the San Bernardino Valley. I had a pony. My sister had a horse. We had a goat. So I was, a farm kid. And so when I got back from Japan, I met with the producers and a couple directors, and they said, yes, we want you to be Timmy. But they had to get Lassie's permission, basically. So I went and lived with Red Weatherwax, Lassie's owner and trainer. He had a ranch outside of LA, about an hour's drive, and spent the weekend out there. Came back Monday to the studio and walked in, and basically Lassie gave me two paws up, and that's how I got the job at Timmy. So I'm a big fan of being in the right place at the right time.
And was your family with you this whole time? Because you were only, what, 6 or 7 years old when you got this role, right?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yes.
mom, like I said, my father was an aeronautical engineer,
Right.
so he's designing airplanes for the government.
Mhm.
And, but mom, yeah, she was with me 99% of the time. And when she wasn't, we had a kind of like a babysitter and nanny that, would be there with me. Um, but yeah, mom and I, when we went to Japan, we spent 3.5 months in Japan in 1956. And yeah, mom on Lassie and all the movies and everything, mom was always there.
What was it like, when you started Lassie, already having had the show be established? How was that show received when the plot kind of changed and Timmy was introduced, and how did the audience take that at the time?
Great question. Well, a lot of people were kind of pissed off that this little kid was coming in and taking over. They loved Tommy.
Mhm.
And they expected a little backlash. People, you like the way a show is going, or you like the way a band is going, and then they replace one band member, and so people go, "Oh God, what's going on?" So we got over that hump. And then Timmy was, widely accepted. But the funny thing was, my first parents on the show, there was Paul and Ruth Martin, but my first parent, everybody remembers June Lockhart,
Mhm.
who we just lost recently at almost 100 years old. Um, and Hugh Riley, who played my father and mother on the show for 6 years. Well, they weren't my first parents. My first parents were Cloris Leachman and a man by the name of John Shepard. Great people, but Cloris hated what she got into. I mean, if you look at June Lockhart and Cloris Leachman, they're like opposites.
Mhm.
And so after a couple months, Cloris decided, I want out of here. I don't want to be stuck on this farm baking cookies for this kid and this dog, for the next 6 years. So they let her, and then they had to let John Shepard go because they didn't think the public would accept one parent switching. I mean, it just didn't seem right. So they replaced them with June Lockhart and Hugh Riley. And the amazing thing is, Aidan, the studio didn't get one letter because the people didn't really care about that. All the people cared about was the kid and the dog. That's what they were focused on.
Right. And how was your relationship with Lassie off camera?
Oh, great. No,
Yeah.
like I said, I love dogs. Um, we also only had one Lassie at a time. There wasn't like five dogs to do different things. Yes, Lassie had a stand-in, a double dog that would do fighting, long shots running over a mountain, why tire out the real dog, and also swimming or, anything that would get the dog's fur wet or muddy. Because back then we didn't have hair dryers, handheld hair dryers, so it would take like almost a week to dry a collie. So they had to have another dog, to do that. But in my 7 years, I worked with three different Lassies. The first dog was the dog that Tommy worked with.
Mhm.
I worked with him for 1 year. He was the son of the original Lassie. Then he was being retired, so then his son took over, and I worked with him for about a year and a half, 2 years, but he wasn't working out so well. Rudd had to bring his son in, which is now the fourth generation. And I ended up working with that dog, and his name was Baby, for 5 years. Just the one dog from when I was 9 to 14, you know, 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, 9 months out of the year, that was the dog that I worked with. I loved him. He loved me. We did everything together. We ate together. We slept together. I mean, we were inseparable. But, and I love this part, if I asked him to do something like sit, roll over, shake hands, whatever, he'd look at me and say, wait a minute, you're my friend. You're not my trainer. And, it had to be that way because he would get distracted if, trying to follow directions from somebody else. But yeah, just the three dogs in 7 years, and they were all great.
I find it amazing that a dog can be the star of a show and it can be trained to do that. It's incredible, and it makes for a legendary show, that's for
Not,
sure.
not only a dog, a horse. There was a series called Mr.
Mr. Ed.
Ed,
Yep.
and it's funny. I quit the Lassie series. We had a 7 year contract. They wanted to go for 3 more years. Uh, Luckily, the 3 year option was ours, and my parents, they said, "What do you want to do? You can be Timmy for 3 more years or not?" I'm 14. I'm thinking about girls. I'm going through puberty, and everybody's thinking of me like this little kid, and I'm going, So I wrote my own pink slip on Lassie, and then one of the first things I did after that was a couple episodes on Mr. Ed. So I went from the smartest dog to the smartest horse.
Wow. That's awesome. And I will get back to Lassie momentarily, but I'm wondering, so you started off very young, as we spoke about. Do you remember that far back, or what is your first memory as an child actor?
Excellent. I do not remember my first two movies.
Okay.
Um, 3 and a half. I mean, I don't think a lot of people remember too much from that age.
Mhm.
Um, and then I remember my third movie, and then from there on, everything else. But I do know everything that happened, in those first movies and stuff, just because I have all that history.
That's awesome. And I'm also wondering, at that time, there were quite a few child actors that were on the scene. Were you able to make friends with a lot of your contemporaries at that time?
Sure, and I still am friends, with a lot of child actors, that are
Mhm.
adults now. Unfortunately, we've lost, quite a few people.
Yeah.
But when we were working, and okay, this is a good example. We're on the Desilu lot, which old RKO,
Mhm.
and we're at one end of the studio, and Lassie's being filmed there, the TV series The Untouchables, and some other shows, a Western. And then at the other end of the studio, they're filming My Three Sons, Lucy, I Love Lucy. So there's other kids, but we're all working. So, we might see each other passing through the lot or at lunchtime at the commissary, something like that, or at events, like the Hollywood Christmas Lane Parade or different events, they would bring the child actors together. So we became friends in that situation. Now, like I said, a lot of guys I'm very close to and have been close to for 50, 60 years. So yeah, we did make friends. And the one thing that was kind of cool. We all belonged to this, fraternity, sorority, this group, whatever you want to call it. So we all had a common experience. And so we may not see each other, for 6 months or a year or whatever, but when we do, it's like, oh yeah, I just saw you yesterday. You know that kind of feeling.
Mhm.
So yeah, and you know, some of the kids I like, some I didn't, but hey, it's just people.
And was it you're all this group and you have the camaraderie, but was there a bit of competition too? I mean, for my show's
Yeah,
better than
well,
yours.
you know, yeah, great question, but not so much with me, but
Mm,
I know with other kids, they would be up for the same parts.
mm.
Maybe that's just the way it went. And there were a couple of times, when I would be on an audition and I'd see my good buddy or one of the guys I knew, and he's on the same audition, and it was kind of like, Well, I hope you get it, and I hope you get it. So you just move on, and you have to be ready for a lot of rejection.
Right.
Oh, you didn't make this one. Okay, see you later.
So you're filming on the Desilu lot. I Love Lucy is one of my favorite shows of all time. I grew up watching that with my mom too. Did you get to meet Lucille Ball or Desi and another?
Boy, this is crazy. They had three lots, and Lucy ran our lot. That she was the one that ran that whole lot. Never really did see Desi, but I would see Lucy on the lot. She had a golf cart that she would use to drive around the lot, get from one end to the other. But I never did actually meet her.
Oh wow.
Just the way it goes. I mean, I'm friends with her daughter, with her family, but never did get to meet Lucy.
Wow. That's kind of a bummer, I bet.
Yeah, well, can't do it all.
Do you have a favorite memory from filming Lassie over those years? A favorite episode?
Well, yes. Like I mentioned earlier, 249 half-hour episodes.
Mm.
We were the first series to do a to be continued. Half
Okay.
hour, and then that Sunday evening it would say, "Oh, episode to be continued next Sunday." We were the first series to do that, and then we did a three-parter, and then we actually did a five-parter, which was at the end of the series. It was the only thing we filmed in color, only five half-hour episodes, and that was put together for a movie, Lassie's Greatest Adventure, which was shown in theaters.
Mm.
But my favorite was a three-parter, and it was called The Odyssey, and it was about Lassie getting trapped in the back of a tractor trailer rig and taken halfway across the country, and then Lassie having to find her way back home. And yeah, that one, the last episode, Timmy, we figured we're never going to see Lassie again. Lassie's gone, and Timmy is bearing Lassie's favorite toys. And then in the distance, you hear a bark, and then
Mm.
Lassie comes running over the hill, and they're reunited. And every time I see that episode, that conjures up, tears and the whole thing. So that's my favorite.
Nothing like a boy and his dog.
You got
To put tears in your eyes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the well.
The
How does
well,
Timmy always end up in the well?
the amazing thing is it never happened. Um, Timmy was not the brightest, tool in the shed. And without Lassie, he would, never have made it. He fell in, off cliffs, into abandoned mine shafts, into culverts, into rivers, you name it. But Timmy never did fall in a well. We don't know where that catchphrase came from. Everybody knows it. Everybody uses it. Um, Never happened. When my wife Lori and I did my autobiography, thank God my mother saved every script, and the cover page of every script was a synopsis. And so we went through, and every script, we did find an episode where some bad guys fell in a well, an old abandoned well, and of course, Timmy and Lassie saved them. Never happened. We don't know, but it's legend. It's one of those urban legends.
Right. And so that's a perfect segue to talk about your book. It must have been amazing writing that, just kind of thinking back on everything and being able
Yeah,
to put it
and
down.
like I said, my mom kept a lot of information because when you're young, you're bombarded with everything, and so you don't retain everything. But um, when we were done with my autobiography, I found out stuff about myself that I didn't know, but it was all true. So yeah, so it's mainly it's about what a one sibling in a family, their celebrity, what that does to a regular family. Like I said, my father wouldn't, not in the business, and I'm the youngest of three. I had an older brother, an older sister, and how it affected their lives, how it affected my father's working for the different aircraft companies that he worked for. A lot of it was focused around, my workings, where I had what I had to do. That's what it's really about.
Did you miss, acting in that career once you decided to step away from it?
Yeah, it's like I was in 1968. I had just turned 18. I was doing a Disney movie with Kurt Russell called The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. And Kurt's 1 year younger than I am, and we were having lunch on the set, and I said, Kurt, it's your birthday, you just turned 17, I just turned 18, and I've been working 15 years." He said, "Maybe I should take a break." And Kurt said, "Yeah, John, I think you should take a break." So, I had finished high school, gonna get ready to go to college, and so that's when I really wrote my second pink slip and kind of left the industry. But the thing that got me was it was the only Disney movie I did, and I really had a lot of fun. And with Kurt, everybody else, it was great. But what Kurt didn't tell me was that the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes was actually going to be three different movies. And so my character Bradley, I would have been in the other two movies if I had known that, and he may not have known that at the time.
Mm.
Um, I would have stayed around and done the other two and then moved on to college. But it never ends. I mean, I've been in some indies in the past few years. I was the voice of a robot in a science fiction movie a couple of years ago called Colonial. Um, Things just move on, and my relationship with animals, and especially dogs, and have been involved with dogs my entire life after the series, with service dogs, war dogs, rescues. I championed for no-kill shelters across the United States. Was on the board of governors of Canine Companions for Independence for 25 years that supplies service dogs to people that have disabilities free of charge. And war dogs, getting it to where handlers, I'm Vietnam era, and we treated our war dogs totally different back then, and it was not good. But now, with work, uh, handlers, if they want to keep their dogs after they've done their deployment, they can have them now, and that's new. And so I've been working with that, and then I have for years have wanted to do something more to help our four-legged, you know, friends, dogs and cats. And so we have a new company. It's called Provost Pets and provostpets.com. And we do a CBD product for dogs and cats to help them with anxiety and separation and noise is loud, like the things that really disturb our pets. And but we don't want to drug them. I mean, we go to the vet. I love vets, but they just want to give them pharmaceuticals that well, it's just like they would us. And so we've developed a product that is 100% safe, no THC, 100% CBD isolate, and vegan coconut oil, or for cats, it has vegan olive oil, and that's it. And we wanted to give back, and so took a long time, and we finally came up with Spray Mix and Go. That's what it's called, and on Provost Pets, and other products we're coming up with. So if people want to check that out, they can.
When you and I were speaking back and forth, planning this episode, and you shared that with me in the email, I thought that was the coolest thing because my dog is a total spaz. I mean, off the walls all the time. So I
Okay.
definitely intend to support your product and give it a shot
All right.
because we are desperate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then it's again too, some breeds,
Mm,
I mean, you can help them, but some breeds, I mean, it's just so ingrained, you're not going to cure it completely, but anything to help, because we now, we've rescued dogs for years. Um, but now our last three dogs have been senior rescues,
mm.
which, everybody wants the cute little guy. Come on, us old guys need help too. So we're on our third senior dog, and they come with a lot of baggage. You
Mhm.
know, you get a dog that's 10, 12, 13 years old, and they may not feel great. They have joint issues. They have all of these things. And that's what CBD does. You know, it helps. I mean, what I like to say is, you know, when normally when we test products, you know, pharmaceuticals for humans, we test them on pets and animals, which is not the best thing. But I like to say, hey, humans have been taking CBD for joint issues and sleep issues and things for years. So we tested it on the humans before we gave it to the pets.
That's awesome. I look forward to trying it, especially the 4th of July when our four-legged friends here
Oh yeah,
make some
it
amazing.
really does help. It really does.
That's really cool, and I'm sure that's really special too to have that tie to the dogs just stick with you your whole life. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, you know, like I said, I I don't know, you know, what I would do without a pet, without a dog. You know, we've had dogs and cats, but right now, we're just with the dog.
That's really special. Yeah, I used to actually be afraid of dogs when I was little, and then we lived with my aunt and uncle for a short time who had a big poodle. So I had to get used to it, and then I did, and now my dog's my best friend. So
And there you go. All
it's
right.
certainly a special series of events. Why do you think that Lassie, the series, or even just Lassie in general, the movies and everything, why do you think it's lasted as long as it has for generations?
You know, it's just that that bond between humans and pets and especially dogs. I mean, you know, dogs, they protect us, they give us love, they can help heal us. You know, dogs can detect if you have certain illnesses, you know. And so, you know, they're there to help us. And the I think the reason, and with Lassie, this is crazy. Yeah, I mentioned 249 episodes, all black and white except for 5. This show is still on in reruns in over 60 countries.
Yeah.
In the US here, it's on over a dozen cable networks. And I think the reason is because every episode had a moral. There was you learned something. Timmy learned from his mistakes, and he became a better person at that. And they, you know, and our episodes. I mean, we touched on the environment. We touched on animal rights. We, you know, we're one of the first to have ethnic people on the show, and I think that the writers and everybody cared about what they were giving the public, and that's why it stays, and that's why people are still enjoying it. And here's something real crazy. Lassie was one of the first American series shown in Russia, and the reason behind that, because there was no politics involved. It
Mm.
was just a farm family and a kid and his dog. So you know, you got rid of all that other stuff. Same thing. I years ago I met Anwar Sadat's daughter, who he was the president of Egypt, and she told me the same thing, that Lassie was the very first American series shown in Egypt, and for that reason, because there was no politics involved.
That's unbelievable. It must mean so much to you to be able to meet fans from all over the world that in places you wouldn't suspect, something like that being shown.
Yes, and the thing is, nobody has ever come up and said they hated Lassie.
Nah, there's
No.
no way. That's impossible. That there's no way you could ever not like a show like that because like you say, it's just so simple, it's fun, and it's a heartwarming show.
Exactly, exactly. Sometimes maybe a little corny, but it worked.
That's what makes it good. I just turned 21 yesterday, and I've been in this industry, the
Happy
music.
birthday.
Thank you. I've been in the music industry since I was 13, so
Okay,
for quite a while. And over the last 3 years, it's really progressed into doing shows. I'm entering into a theater this year that I'll be doing a couple of shows, and so it's
great.
growing and it's great. But I have learned a lot along the way. Some great things, some not so great things about the industry. What lessons have you learned that have really stuck with you and possibly that would lead to advice giving to younger people?
Well, you know, it's like I said, I didn't have a say. I was not quite 3 years old, my first job, and I basically grew up on a soundstage. I would be asleep in the car going to the studio. I would be there, like I said, it was 10-hour days. And that included, 3 hours of schooling and everything. Uh, I have kids come up all the time and ask the question, and it's like, okay, if this is something you really, really want to do, and I think early on, what you're going to be drawn to.
Right.
Um, if you really want that, then go for it. But get involved at a young age with your school, with your drama department or your music department or whatever it is. Or if you have family members or friends or that are in that, if they're in the music business or whatever, um, you go with them, learn from them. And then the other thing is you gotta be able to take a lot of rejection.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure you know this. So,
Mhm.
um, uh, it's and for some people, it's like water on a duck's back. It's no big deal. Other people, it can be pretty devastating. And I'll just give you a very quick example. My sister uh, dabbled a little bit in the show business thing, kind of, like, okay, my brother's doing it, so I can get into those auditions. My sister was up for a part for a movie called Gidget, and the other person that was up for, or another person that was up for that part was Sally Field. Well, it came down to the two, my sister, Sally Field. Sally got the part for the series and then, of course, became an incredible star after that. But that was the straw that broke my sister's back. She said, "No, okay, that's it. I'm done with this." And it's just that was it. She was tired of the rejection, um, and moved on, and had a great life, and still with us, and so. But I think that's the thing. If you really want to do it, then really put the effort in. Just having a look isn't enough, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and be ready for that, rejection. Not sorry, and try not to take it personally. I mean, I know that's devastating, but you have to say, "Okay, I just didn't fit exactly for that part,"
Right.
you know?
And I 100% understand that. My job out here, or part of it, a major part of it, is I have an Elvis tribute act that I do. And that's my main area of expertise, I suppose. But there are hundreds, maybe thousands of Elvis guys doing exactly what I do.
Right.
So no matter where I reach out to play, they're likely to already have their guy, and I have to keep looking elsewhere for work. So it's challenging, but you find the places, and
Mhm.
you fall in there, and that's where it develops. So
Exactly.
I definitely understand that.
Alright.
So what are your plans for the future? Do you have any other,
Well,
exciting?
oh yeah, I'm still open. Hey, if the phone rings, why not? It's like when I got this call a couple of years ago for hey, would you like to be the voice of a robot? Well, I'd never done any science fiction. I said, sure. But then I asked the guy, I said, why? Why did you pick me? And he said, I'll tell you exactly why. He said, growing up and going to college, and he's young in his, mid 30s. And he said, growing up in college, we used to always watch Lassie Friday nights and, have fun and whatever. And he said, but what really stuck with me was the relationship with the dog and you. And he said, the robot is like Lassie. And the robot has to protect our lead character. So it was that your relationship with the kid and the dog that got me to be a robot, for an astronaut. Kind of like, okay, watching it. Nah, I'm gonna pretend I don't want you to fall, down that well. So he would be there. But I just thought it was really funny that's because I wanted to know why'd you pick me? What so that was that. So yeah, and moving forward, yeah, if the phone rings and I can do it, why not? June Lockhart told me that years ago when I was, 8 years old. She said, "Look, I'm an adult and she was only in her late 20s, but she said, "I'm an adult playing an adult. You're a child playing a child. Someday you will be an adult and you will be playing an adult." So she just wanted everything to be really professional. And I was a little precocious, kicking her under the table, that kind, and she kind of put me in my place. And that was great. And then our thing now, Provost Pets, moving on with that. And so this should be a great year.
I hope so, and I will certainly link the Provost Pets at the end of this episode so my viewers can see and
Great.
hopefully make a visit to
Appreciate
them.
that. Thank you. Thank you.
Looking back on your entire career, this is my last question for you. What are you most proud of?
Well, I would have to say Lassie.
Right.
I mean, the movies did some great. I got to work with some incredible people. Um, so one of the last movies I did, one of the first movies I did after Lassie was This Property is Condemned with Robert Redford and Natalie Wood and Charles Bronson and just some incredible people, and Mary Badham, who was Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mhm.
That was really great. But, the one I think that makes the most impact, and of course, for me, growing up, it was 7 years of my life from 7 to 14. Um, it has to, and like I said, nobody ever came up and said they hated it. That, "Oh god, that was a horrible show." No, never happened. They might say, "Never seen it, never heard of it," but nobody ever said they hated it. So,
Well, that's something to be proud of in itself. That's really amazing.
yeah, thank you.
This has been a real pleasure getting to speak with you today, and I just want to thank you so much for, you know, giving us, your viewers, all these memories, but for sharing them
Alright.
as well with us today. This
Well,
is
thank you, and, yeah, it's been super speaking with you.
Thank you so much, John. And for everyone watching, be sure to join us again in the green room real soon. And until then, may God bless you, and we'll see you soon.